It is a sweet day to be back. My wife Catherine and I served here for a while. We're thankful to be home when we're here. It's just a sweet sseason for us, and I have the privilege today of giving Zach's eulogy. What could go wrong? When Zach texted and kind of gave a life update to me and a couple others, we just decided we wouldn't miss it. And so I wanted to be here to honor the Ray family and all that God has done in our midst because of them. And I don't know where Zach went, probably went to Shoney's, I don't know. But when I think about Zach Ray, I think of the word faithful. Faithful through transition, faithful through difficult days, through uncertainty, through all of the versions of ClearView over the last decade. Zach was here for all of it, and he stayed with his hand on the plow to be able to see God do a movement here at ClearView. Zach, you are a son of this house. And today we get to honor you. Only heaven knows the impact that the Ray family has on Franklin, Tennessee. And I'm also confident that right now in Oklahoma, there is a woman probably watching us online who deserves maybe even more honor. Brittany Ray. Brittany, we thank you for putting up with Zach. We thank you for putting up with us and for all of the sacrifice untold that you have made to allow the Lord to use your family over the last decade. And we're so thankful that God would bring you guys here for this season. As Alexis mentioned, we were a part of ministry here for about 4 years or so, and man, the Lord was just so kind to us to allow us to lock arms with you for that season. We serve now with a church in Mississippi called Pinelake. When we left here, we went to go serve with the Oxford campus and did that for it's a multi-site church, several campuses around the state, helped lead the Oxford campus, and then figured out we finally got fed up with Ole Miss. And so after about 2 years there, we stayed with Pinelake, but have taken on a new role, reassigned by the Lord to help lead the Pinelake School of Ministry. And so what that looks like, it's a fancy wording. What that looks like is a ministry residency program. It's about 15 to 20 at any given time in that program. Internship for the summer, which is another 30 to 35 or so all over the state, helping pull off camps and kids ministry stuff, student ministry stuff. And I kind of help get to be part of that team. A lot of our seminary partnership with our church. I get to have a hand in how the Lord uses theological education for our staff and all of the development that kind of has housed, that allows for young leaders to go forward in ministry, kind of lives with us. And I recognize that I do all of that while standing on shoulders of people like you. People who took time to invest in my family, people who were just gracious enough to invite us in and allow us to be a part of the kingdom work called ClearView for the time that you did. We don't touch a single ounce of what God is allowing us to do right now without walking through the season that we shared here together. And so from the bottom of my heart, I stood on this stage 4 years ago and said, thank you. Today, I may mean it even more than I did 4 years ago. And so really excited about what God's doing in this church and how the Lord is moving among your midst. Immediately after we moved away from here, life changed a little bit more for us by way of a baby girl. I brought a picture. This is Harper Grace. And if you leave it up there too long, I'm going to cry because this is as long as we've been away from her for a minute. And so Harper is a gift to us. She will be 2 in October, and thank goodness she's like her mama, because if she was like me, she'd already be in juvie. And so, but the Lord has been super kind to us to allow us to be the parents of a girl. We shared a similar journey with others in the church of just kind of waiting on God to provide. And that's kind of what I want to share with you today. Not necessarily that journey, but the posture of what it looks like to wait on the Lord. I'm serious. If you leave the picture up any longer, I'm going to cry. Thank you. Appreciate you, David. 2 Kings chapter 4, if you have a Bible, 2 Kings chapter number 4. There was a man from the Midwest in the late 1800s. His name was Harvey Wilcox. Harvey was a wealthy man. He was a Jesus-loving man, and God put it on his heart, living in the Chicago area, to decide to uproot his family's life, take all of his heart, his family, and his resources, and begin to try to catalyze a gospel-centric movement on the West Coast. And so he sold everything he had in the Midwest. He bought a whole bunch of land just northwest of downtown Los Angeles. Again, 1887, not a whole lot happening by way of church movement out there. And Harvey decided he was going to pack it all up and go and begin a gospel-centric movement that would hopefully radicalize all of the western part of our country with the gospel, equipping them to move forward with kingdom work. He was so committed to the vision that he would actually sell or give away the pieces of land, little parcels, lots, to be able to give those to people who would move with him, who would come be a part of this kind of church planting network. Is again, the vision is to realize a gospel movement across the West Coast. They buy all this land and they kind of want to give an identity to this neighborhood, kind of give a label so it would be known in the community as a certain part of the area. And he gave that responsibility to his wife to name it. And she thought about it for a minute, and she named it after her favorite Midwestern estate, an estate called Hollywood. That's right, the Hollywood that you and I have come to know so well was originally intended to be the epicenter of a gospel-centric movement that would reach the whole country from Los Angeles. Can we just say it fell short of the founder's vision? And I wonder if you've been there. Maybe not just Hollywood, but you found yourself in a place where something didn't go the way that you planned it. That you had a vision for something, you had an idea in your mind, a burden on your heart for a certain thing to happen, and you just knew that it was going to happen a certain way, and then it ended up being disappointed. The vision, the heart, the burden that was on your mind to carry something forward, something that brought you so much hope or life or encouragement, now brings you nothing but discouragement. Maybe somebody in the house this morning is dealing with this feeling even right now. You're walking through a season, you're sitting with something right now that if you were to draw it up, this is not the way that it would have gone. There's something happening in your family. There's something happening at work or in your neighborhood or with a daughter or a son or a brother or a sister. There's a financial issue. There's a relational problem. There's brokenness in your world, and it's just not the way that you would have expected it to go. Maybe this feeling is a little bit more pervasive in our spaces, the places in which you and I walk every single day. I think it might be a little bit more common than we might realize, this sense of disappointment, discouragement, brokenness, isolation, hopelessness. I get to be a part of some summer camps each year through Lifeway called Fuge Camps, and one of my responsibilities as a camp pastor, one of the mornings is to go meet with all of the adult leaders and just kind of try to offer some encouragement to them. They've been sleeping on mattresses you would not believe all week long, and they've been sacrificing a whole lot for their crew, and I'm supposed to give them kind of a word of encouragement. I'll just be honest with you, it's become a little bit robotic for me, a little bit just kind of routine, and so that morning came at Ridgecrest Conference Center in North Carolina. I did my spiel, and I was just kind of ready to kind of conclude the time, and I felt the Spirit of the Lord just kind of say, hey, you need to pause for a second and ask the room if there's something that we can be praying for. Instead of just offering kind of some blanket prayer, can you open the floor for a moment and see if there's something you can pray for the room? The room could join together and pray. And I'll just be honest with you, I wasn't prepared for what ensued. I offered the floor up for a second, and about 30 seconds of awkward silence happened. And then a man to my left stood up and he said, my wife called this morning. My son's been in and out of the hospital, and they've decided this morning to put him on a feeding tube this afternoon, and I'm away, and they're not sure how this is even going to go. About 10 seconds later, a man behind him stood up and said, our church is hurting right now. Said our pastor passed away unexpectedly 3 weeks ago after 20 years of serving our church family, and I'm the only other guy on our staff, and I have no idea what to do. About 20 seconds later, a woman stands up to the right of the stage and says, my brother's going to prison next month, and I'm now responsible for his kids for the next 5 to 7 years. Another man stood up about 60 seconds later, and in that moment, I could just feel the brokenness on this man's heart. And he said, my wife left me last month. And I'm just here because the youth pastor didn't want me to be by myself this week. And so he came to camp. And then maybe the most heartbreaking situation in the room, a woman stood up and needed even help kind of sharing this. There's a girl in their youth group that's there that week who held her best friend a month and a half earlier as she died after being hit by a car at the beach. And she's here seeking healing, and the group doesn't know how to help her. What was true about that room was there was so much more brokenness than I realized. That room was filled with people who were sitting in situations with seemingly no solutions. What do we do when we don't know what to do? What do we do when life hits us in the mouth? When things don't go the way that we had planned them? When brokenness, as a result of a broken world, seems to show up at our front door? What do we do? In 2 Kings chapter 4, we find the story of a woman who was faced with a similar circumstance. Tommy read it a minute ago, and we're going to zoom in a little bit on this story because I think there's at least 3 or 4 things that I think we can learn as we posture ourselves in a season of waiting on God to move. We're going to read it together again. 2 Kings chapter 4, beginning in verse 1 says, one day the widow of a member of the group of prophets came to Elisha, cried out, my husband who served you is dead, and you know how he feared the Lord. But now a creditor has come threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves. This woman, we don't know her name, but we know she's a widow in a patriarchal society, which means she lived in a society in which the rights and privileges of women were limited at best. And she's in a vulnerable position. We don't know exactly why she's in a financial crisis. She does say in verse 1 that it's her husband's creditors who have come for her, but maybe it's something her husband did. Maybe it's something that she did. Maybe it's something that neither one of them did, but just as the world seems to work today, there are creditors who just take advantage of vulnerable people. But either way, to be a widow in this society was to be in an incredibly vulnerable place, an incredibly desperate and broken situation. She's lost her husband, she's lost her money, and now she's afraid she's going to lose her children. So she's found what many of us would consider to be rock bottom, consider to be a problem beyond solution. She needs a way out, and what does she do? Verse 1 says that she cries out to the prophet for help. This word for cries out is a word that literally translates an urgent cry that demands a response. It's not just a, hey, if you have time. It's not just a, hey, if you can get to it, or hey, I could use some help. No, she calls out and she says, I'm not going anywhere until you help me. And right out of the gate, friends, I think we find a lesson, a posture, an idea that we can consider when we're dealing with a situation that we don't know what to do with. If you want God to move on something in your life, to do the miraculous, to move in a powerful way, the first thing that you have to do, if you're taking notes, is to acknowledge your condition. To acknowledge your condition. The primary requirement for a miracle is you're recognizing your own need for one. You have to be honest about where you are. You have to reach the point where you admit that you can't fix it on your own. Options A, B, and C all have to run out. Everything else has to fail. You can't solve it with money. You can't work it out with overtime. You can't fix it with power or influence or some sort of leverage. You can't use any other man-made resource or human effort to resolve it. Everything and everyone that you usually lean on for support has to fail you. And when they do, you have to choose to resign from your position as the boss of your situation. And your resignation becomes God's invitation. You're sitting in the back seat. I think the theologian Carrie Underwood said it this way: Jesus, take the wheel. When I think about this, I think about our little girl, and when she was really little, she was beginning to do the whole rolling over thing, and she was really great at rolling over onto her stomach. didn't have the gift of rolling over to her back. And so she would get all worked up and she would roll over under her stomach and then she would hate it. She'd get used to it after about 15 seconds and just decide, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And she couldn't figure out how to get back over her shoulder, rolling over to her back. And what she would do is she would lay on that stomach and she would try to fidget and she would fuss and she would get agitated and frustrated. And then what would she do? She would cry. She had done everything she knew how to do to fix her situation. She'd done everything she knew how to do to reposition herself, to kind of figure out how she in her own strength could figure it out. And then she would cry for Daddy. So, Daddy, I need help. Will you pick me up? Will you fix it? Will you come do what I can't do for myself? And this is the posture we have to find ourselves in. And I recognize that this sounds simple, but it ain't easy. Because there are things in our souls that can get in the way of that, right? I think about pride. Being too proud to ask for help. We have a hard time sometimes admitting when we're weak, admitting that we're not strong enough to fix it on our own. I think about independence. Some of us are just kind of wired to not ask for help. We're just wired to be the one who helps other people. I'm going to serve. I'm going to be the Martha in the room, but I'm not going to be honest enough to raise my hand when something's going on. I'm just going to be independent. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and I'm going to do it on my own. Maybe for somebody in the room, it's shame that keeps you from being honest. Maybe if you just zoomed in for a second on your situation, you'd be honest and say, man, I'm sitting in something that's the product of my own doing. I'm laying in the bed that I made, as it were. And I don't want to have to admit that I have broken something. I don't want to have to be honest that I have messed something up, that this is a mess that I'm sitting in, the storm that brewed up because of something that I held the wrong way, and we live in shame. Or maybe for somebody in the room, you're more like me, it's an impatience that if you turn something over to God, then it's going to be up to his timing, and that just doesn't sound very freeing. D.A. Carson said, the reason that Christians don't pray for patience is because it assumes that you'll be put in a situation you don't like. And for me, sometimes I think if I really give it to God, then I don't get to have any control of it, as if me having control of it has ever worked out in my favor. Maybe for somebody, it's denial. It'll get better one day. I'm sure it'll eventually all work out. It's not as bad as it seems. I'll just turn the other way, and maybe one day it will just go away. I don't know what the hang up in this woman's story was, but I know she had to get over all of it to be able to come to a place where she could be honest, where she would say, this is where I am, and I need somebody to help. And if we want God to move on something in our lives, friends, we have to do the same thing. Verse 2 continues on. The prophet says, what can I do to help you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? Nothing at all except a jar of olive oil. She replied, and Elisha said, borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and your neighbors, then go into your house with your sons, shut the door behind you. Pour olive oil from your flask into the jars, setting each one aside once it is filled. So the woman lays out her situation. She tells Elijah everything she knows about anything. And then Elijah responds with a question. What do you have in the house? What's already in your possession? What has God already given you? What are we working with here? She says, one small jar of oil. And then don't miss it, he doesn't just take care of it by himself. He gives her a job. He gives her a responsibility, something to hold. He tells her what to do next. He doesn't tell her what he's going to do. He tells her what she needs to do. So we acknowledge our condition, we have to be honest about where we are, and then once we take it to the Lord, the second thing, if you're taking notes, is then we have to listen for God's direction. We listen for God's direction. When you and I lay something in front of the Lord, we take something, as the psalmist said, lay and wait an expectation for him to move. We bring something into the house. We lay it in front of the Lord. There are at least two, but I can think of two in my own life, two traps that we have to avoid. Two postures that we have to be sure that we avoid. The first I'll call the trap of sitting out. It's this posture of, hey, I've given that to God. He'll call me when it's done. He'll take care of it, and I'll just kind of sit here and wait for him to do it. And notice in the story here, Elisha didn't just say, hey, I'll take care of it. He doesn't just hand her some money. He doesn't just tell her to carry on and he'll handle it. He doesn't negotiate with the creditors for her. He doesn't try to fix her situation in that moment at all. No, he, a prophet representing God, gave her a job to do. He gave her ownership in the miracle that she was asking for. He gave her a responsibility to hold. He tells her, go collect a bunch of jars. Take what oil you have and pour it out. Don't miss it. Don't zoom past it. He tells her to take the only thing she has in her possession that would have been the indicator of her poverty and turns it into the instrument of her provision. But he tells her to take the very thing that she's holding on to, the only possession the Bible says that she has, and to take the risk of pouring it out. He asked her for faith. And the evidence of that faith was going to be found in the work, in her obedience, and her following what God had told her. When I was in middle school, my parents had gotten me this fancy scientific calculator. They were just kind of hot on the scene in my 8th grade year or so. And it was the kind that had a big screen on it, and you could type all the letters and all the formulas and everything. It was a graphing calculator, so literally you just plug in the formula, you hit the enter button, and it just populates with whatever it was. And for a guy like me who wasn't good at math, this was a game changer for me. And so, I'm so excited. It would graph things, it would chart things. You just plug it in exactly like the paper says. You hit the enter button, and bam. And you can pass any test that they give you. And so I'm excited to take this calculator to my 8th grade class, my math class in algebra, Miss Nancy Britt. I hope she's not watching today. Miss Britt handed a quiz out my first day with this calculator, and I was just so pumped because I had struggled through math at this point in my life, and I was so excited because I finally had the tool that was going to make it all easy. And so I hit the equations in, I plugged everything in, I hit enter, I do it about 15 times on this quiz. I turn the quiz in, go home for the weekend, don't think anything about it, and I'm rolling. I'm thinking my math game has changed forever. I get back on Monday, and she returns the quizzes, and on the top of my quiz is a big red 0. And I'm thinking, man, I'm pretty sure I got at least one of them right. Like the calculator, I plugged it all. I got big fingers, but I think I got it all right. I'm thinking, did my parents give me the Temu version of this calculator? Is this am I finding out the hard way? This is not going well for me. And I'm confused because I know that I did everything that I knew how to do to plug all the equations in. And I went up to Miss Britt's desk and I said, Miss Britt, what's the problem here? Did I get all the answers wrong? And she said, no, they're right. I said, well, Miss Britt, what's the issue? She's like, you got the right answers, but you didn't show me your work. I said, but I got the right answers. I said, well, what's the problem? She said, yeah, but you didn't learn anything. And sitting in an 8th grade classroom, Miss Nancy Britt teaches me something that I think I still hold on to often today. Growth doesn't happen with quick, easy answers. Growth happens in a process. God is more interested in growing your faith than meeting your expectations. And if he takes you through a fire, as Warren Wiersbe says, his eye is on the clock and his hand is on the thermostat. You won't be in there a second longer or a degree hotter than he intends it. But growth happens in the process. And here's my fear, ClearView. If we aren't careful, we can become so focused on what we want God to do in our situation that we miss what he might want to be doing in our soul. The ground that he's wanting to till up, the formational change he wants to do in our hearts. Yes, sometimes God's response to our prayers is intervention. He does just step into the miracle. But in other times, God's response to our prayers is instruction. He has something he wants us to hold. He puts something in front of us to be obedient with. We can't afford to fall into the trap of sitting out. The second trap I think we can fall into sometimes is the one I'll call the trap of zoning out. You learn this in marriage. There's a difference between hearing and listening. The other day, we were in the car somewhere, and Catherine just started a conversation with, "You're not even listening to me." And I thought that was a crazy way to start a conversation. There's a difference between hearing and listening. Throughout the Old Testament, there's a word that shows up a bunch. It's a Hebrew word called the word Shema. And it's a word that has a double meaning. It means to both listen and obey, used interchangeably. The word literally is one that says listen with the intention of obeying. So parents, here it is. When you tell a child, "You're not listening to me," what are you really saying? You're not obeying me. You're not listening to me is really, you're not doing what it is that I told you to do. And I feel like sometimes we can take our problems to God. The situation we're finding ourselves in, we can take it to the Lord, and then it feels like we don't get an answer. We don't get a solution. There is no Band-Aid from heaven that shows up and fixes it. And we can get frustrated, and we say things like, "God, are you listening to me?" And then he looks at us and he goes, "Yeah, but are you listening to me?" You see, prayer is a two-way street. It's not a monologue. It's a dialogue. It's a conversation. Can I tell you what I'm learning in my own life? Prayer is not you leaving God a voicemail, just waiting to see whenever he has some time, he'll get back to you. You just lay your request and then you bail out and hang up the phone, and then you wonder why you don't hear him talk. You hung up. It's this idea that we're walking into the throne room of God, and we're climbing up on the bed, and we're sitting and just talking to Daddy for a while. And imagine thinking that in that conversation, your voice should be the loudest, that you should go first. You're sitting in the presence of the God of the universe and thinking, "I'll go first. I've got something I need to say. I've got something that I need to share. What I have to say is the most important." And what I'm learning in my own life, friends, is God has far more to tell me than I think I need to tell him. And he's got a lot more that he wants to say to me. The question is, am I actually taking time to listen? When I'm asking God to move, am I posturing my own heart in a way that would say, "Hey, I'm here, I'm listening, and I'm ready to do what it is that you tell me to do. I know what I think I need you to do, but I'm going to sit long enough to experience what you might want to say to me." I think Mary saw Jesus at the tomb because she stayed. She waited. She waited on something to happen. And I think sometimes for us, we can drop our kind of voicemail request to God, and then we go about our day and we wonder why we don't hear anything. It's because we didn't sit with him. We didn't stay. We didn't listen with the intent of obeying. And I love it. This is what the woman does. Verse 5, she does that with what she heard. The Bible very simply says, "So she did as she was told." And it's in that moment that I begin to kind of humanize her in my own mind for a second. I begin to kind of see her as she begins to walk through the neighborhood. Imagine this woman just kind of knocking on neighbors' doors, just kind of gradually making her way through the neighborhood, asking for a whole bunch of Tupperware. Imagine the humility that she must have felt. She probably had a reputation in her neighborhood. If her situation has gotten as desperate as the Bible says, then it probably wasn't a secret to her neighbors. She'd probably asked for help before. And yet she still finds herself with a task in front of her to go knock on the door. "Hey, you got any Tupperware that I can borrow?" So she starts asking for the empty jars. I'm sure she looked crazy to a whole lot of people. They knew she didn't have anything. What in the world could she want these containers for? And I have to believe, friends, that with every knock, she began to have the same questions. What if I'm wrong? What if this is a waste of time? What if this is a joke? What if Elisha can't come through like he said he would? What if they label me something? What if they think I'm crazy? I know how little oil I have. This doesn't make any sense. What if this is a waste? What if I pour the oil out and now I don't have anything? And I have to believe that in her own humanity, she had her doubts about where this oil was supposedly going to come from. But she collected the jars anyway. So we acknowledge our condition, we listen for God's direction, and then after we've done that, we just trust in God's provision. Not knowing anything about where this oil was going to come from, had a word spoken over her, but didn't really know what to do with it. And she takes the risk of going to get all the jars, the image that it might have looked like, but she collects the jars anyway. Can I tell you this? There is a significant difference between believing that God can do something and believing that he actually will. You see, I don't think we doubt that God can do something. At least I hope we wouldn't stand up in the house today and God can't do that. But with our own response, where we find ourselves, the way we live is, I guess he could, but I'm not really planning that he will. I love the story, the metaphor in James chapter 5 that talks about a farmer planting seeds before he ever sees a drop of rain. If God sends the rain on the fields with no seeds, you just get a whole bunch of mud. If God sends the oil, but there are no containers, you just get a mess, and it becomes a waste. This woman quite literally had to prepare for a miracle that she couldn't see yet. There's an interesting nugget that we passed over a minute ago in verse 2. When the widow first described her jar of oil, she used the word osuk, which is a Hebrew word that means a small flask, small little container. In verse 3, when Elisha says to the woman to go get jars from her neighbors, he doesn't use the word osuk. He uses the words kele, which is a word that means large storage containers. So he says, the woman says, this small jar is all that I have. And then Elisha says, hey, I hear you. Go get the biggest containers that you can find and don't get a few of them. Get a bunch of them. So go get these as big jars as you can find and get as many of them as you can find. He says, I want you to go get something bigger than this little jar. What is he saying? Lock in right here. Here's what he's saying. God is able to give you more than you're currently prepared to receive. And this is a word for you and me today. Is it possible, friends, that we are currently praying for God to give us something that we aren't ready for? Is it possible that asking God to tell you what you need is better than telling him what you think you need? Oh, that we would be a people who live with humble hearts and open hands when we approach a God who holds it all. Would we be so humble to say, God, I don't even know what I need, but prepare me for what it is that you want to give me. He tells her, hey, there's something that God is able to give you, but I need you to go do the work to prepare for it. Sometimes our preparation comes before God's provision. And in verse 5 says she did as she was told. Her sons kept bringing jars to her, and she filled one after another. Soon every container was full to the brim. She said, bring me another jar. And they said, there aren't any more. And then the olive oil stopped flowing. This is the Inman commentary. I have to believe that if she would have had another jar, that one would have been filled too. You will be filled to the degree of your openness. Adrian Rogers said it this way, I don't know how much of Jesus you have, but I know you have as much as you want. You'll be filled to the degree of your openness. And I want to sidestep for a second because I hope I'm among friends. There are people probably in the house today, watching online or wherever you may be, who are facing a situation in your life that I know nothing about. And I don't pretend to. I don't know what came into the room with you today. I don't know what you might be walking through, but I know that there can be circumstances in life that bring you to a point where you just find this a little hard to believe. Maybe you can believe this woman's story, but you find it tough to believe it has anything to do with yours. Yeah, great. It happened for her. It's in the Bible. I guess it's true, but I'm not really sure that I can do anything with that on Sunday, July the 27th. What in the world does that have to do with my life? There could be something in the room this morning that is staring you in the face, and you have no idea what God could even do with it. I don't even know what the solution to this could be. How in the world is he going to fix this? I don't want to come into the room this morning with some sort of formula. I don't want to preach some sort of like, hey, here's the 3 steps and God's going to grant all your wishes. It's not this simple, and life can get messy sometimes, but can I offer you a picture today, a word today, a picture of hope? You want to see how big God is and how powerful he can be. At the beginning of the story, what was the woman's fear? Who did she fear? She feared the creditors. She said, the creditors are coming and they can take my sons. All she's looking for is somebody who can satisfy her family's debt. That's it. Can somebody pay them off so I can keep my family together? That's her only request. It's all that she asked for. And yet in verse 7, it says, when she told the man of God what had happened, he said to her, now, sell the olive oil, pay your debts, and then you and your sons can live on the rest. So not only did she receive what it was that she had asked for, not only did she receive enough to pay her debts, but she received more than what she asked for. She said, all she wanted was, she said, if you'll just help me pay the debt I owe. And God said, not only will I cover your debt, but I'll give you a new way of life. And friends, this is the gospel. Jesus says, not only will I pay your sin debt, I'll give you enough to live on today. If you'll trust me. I'll be the one to sustain you in the dark places. I'll be the one to be your rock and your shield when the world caves in around you. I'll be your light on dark days. I will give you abundant life. I'm holding it all right here if you'll just trust me for it. If you'll just come to me. I have what you need. I have what you needed then, and I have what you need now. This picture in John chapter 21 of the guys after they've seen the risen Christ, and Peter just says, I'm going fishing, and they go out on the water, and they cast the net on the side of the boat, and they don't get any fish. Jesus appears on the shore and says, you don't have any fish, do you? And it was a humiliating question for them. And they said, no, we don't have anything. He says, cast the net on the other side of the boat, and a bunch of fish show up. John gives a number like 300 and something fish in the net. And that seems like a great story until you finish it. And then they says they docked the boats and came to the shore, and Jesus already had fish on the fire. And he says the words, come and have breakfast with me. What's he saying? He's saying, hey, you went out on the water looking for the one thing that I can provide for you if you'd start here. You ain't got to work for it. You can try, but if you'd start right here, I've got what you need all along. If you'll just start right here with me. His name was Danny Simpson. Danny was in 1990 was in Ottawa, Canada, and he had fallen on hard times. He had a mess on his hands, financial situation, 26 years old, living in an incredible amount of debt. And it was getting desperate. He tried to keep some jobs, tried to make some extra money, and it was just getting to be difficult. And Danny decided that he was going to take matters into his own hands. 26 years old, 1990, Ottawa, Canada, and he decides, I'm going to rob a bank. So he loads a pistol that his father had left him when his father passed away, loads this pistol up, walks down to a local bank, robs the bank, makes away with about $6,000. Makes it a couple miles down the road. The police come, do the investigation, see the cameras. They know who Danny is, and so they go track Danny down. They find him with all of the money, and they arrest him, put him in jail. They give the money back to the bank, and they begin to document and investigate the crime for the process to begin on the prosecution of Danny Simpson. as they are investigating, they're documenting all the evidence, and they come across this pistol, and one of the officers recognizes this pistol is not a normal pistol. Never seen it before. They take it to a local gunsmith in town to get information about it because they have to document everything. And this gunsmith is sitting there holding this pistol, and he cannot believe what he's holding. He says there's probably less than 50 of these in the world. This was a pistol made in 1918 by the Ross Rifle Company. Probably less than 50 in the world, and it's probably estimated to be worth about $100,000. If Danny Simpson would have recognized the value of what his father left him, he never would have gone to find it anywhere else. And ClearView family, when you and I recognize the value of what your father has left you, you'll go trust him for it. You'll believe that he has it right there and that he wants to give it to you if you'll start with him, if you'll be honest about where you are, if you'll be obedient with what he tells you to do about it. And then you posture yourself in a way that says, even though I can't see it yet, I will trust in God. So I want to lead us to pray this morning that way. I would love to just turn the house into a moment of prayer just for a second. I don't know where you are. I don't know what the Lord might be doing in your life in this space, but I do know that he is sovereign over all of it. And so can we pray together this morning? Can I just invite you into a moment with the Lord where you begin to seek what it is that he wants to do? I don't know what the next step for you might be in your circumstance, but I believe everybody has one. And so could we just take a moment and pray and ask the Lord? Somebody needs to be honest about where they are this morning. Be honest about a circumstance in your life, something happening. And you've tried everything around you. You have tried every solution that you can come up with on your own, and it's failed you. And there's an opportunity this morning as we pray for you to just seek the Lord and be honest about where you are. For somebody else in the house, maybe it's an openness and an obedience, a posture of just saying, God, I know that I've said a lot to you, but I haven't listened to what you might want to say to me. And so this morning I want to sit and just listen. This week, I just want to sit and listen. I want to see what it is that you might want to give me, a calling, a next step, an obedience that I'm supposed to have with what I'm sitting in. And maybe there's somebody in the house that has been real honest about where you are, and you've been seeking the Lord, and maybe there's just some jars that you've got to go get today. There's some seeds you've got to plant in the field today. There's a provision you've got to trust the Lord for. Can we just use this time to allow the Lord to minister to us and for us to just be honest enough to come into the bedroom and climb up on the bed and just sit and talk to our Father for a minute? Can we posture ourselves with humility and vulnerability and honesty, even in community this morning? And can we seek the face of a God who can do more in a moment than we could in a lifetime? And could we find ourselves in the presence of a God who's not biting his nails, a God who is not nervous or concerned or confused, but a God who has never been caught off guard, a God who's never been surprised, and a God who sits among us today saying, hey, if you'll just start with me, come and have breakfast here. I've got what you need.